Whispers on Steel. Book 1 of the Railway Inheritance. Written by Melody Gilly. Chapter 6. The cottage was silent when Sonya returned, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the windows. The pink silk scarf slipped through her fingers like water as she draped it over the back of a chair, its golden birds catching the light. "Uncle Gregory?" she called, moving from room to room. The usual sounds of shuffling papers and muttered theories were absent, the kitchen cold, his study empty. A note lay propped against the teapot on the kitchen table, her uncle's precise handwriting familiar after weeks of deciphering his research notes. Sonya, called London unexpectedly, a former colleague from Scotland Yard, requires consultation on a matter possibly related to our research. I'll be back tomorrow evening. Do forgive my overzealous approach to your mother's past. Old detective habits die hard, and I sometimes forget that what is a case file to me is family history to you. Take whatever time you need with the journals. There are leftovers in the icebox, should you wish for a quiet evening. G. Sonya ran her finger along the edge of the note, a strange sense of liberation washing over her. An evening without Uncle Gregory's theories and questions, without the weight of his expectations. The cottage felt different without him. Less like an investigation headquarters, more like a potential home. She moved to the window, watching clouds gather over the distant moors. The decision crystallized with an unexpected clarity. She would meet Sullivan Von Vogel for dinner, not for Uncle Gregory's investigation, not to uncover family secrets, but for herself, to satisfy her curiosity about the man whose family was so intricately linked with hers. The thought of Michael flickered briefly across her mind, his steady presence, his unspoken devotion. But Michael was an ocean away, and Sullivan was here, offering a window into a past her mother had sealed shut. As if drawn by gravity, she found herself climbing the stairs to her room, where her mother's journal lay on the bedside table. The green ribbon had moved again, marking a page she hadn't yet read. Had Uncle Gregory been looking through it? Or did the journal itself somehow guide her reading, revealing its secrets in a carefully determined order? Sitting at the window seat, Sonya opened the marked page, the familiar handwriting flowing across the cream-colored paper. November 17th, 1941. The midnight freight carried 6 unmarked crates tonight. I shouldn't have looked, should never have used the master key to access the secure car. But the weight discrepancies have been growing. And after what Jay told me about Sebastian's meetings with the German attaché, I had to know. Bombs, not especially large, but precision crafted, each nestled in wood shavings like deadly eggs. Most bore German manufacturing marks, but 3 had British insignia. The shipping manifest listed industrial equipment, calibration devices. I copied the serial numbers, though my hand shook so badly I could barely hold the pencil. Jay says he can trace them through his contacts. The question that keeps me awake isn't just where they're going, but where they came from. Why would Sebastian be shipping British bombs to Dresden? Who benefits from such a transfer? Jay believes there must be a legitimate explanation. Perhaps they're being returned after inspection. Perhaps it's part of some intelligence operation. But I saw Sebastian's face when the crates were loaded. He knows exactly what he's transporting and for whom. Something is happening on these midnight runs that goes beyond railway business. Something that makes my blood run cold. Sonya closed the journal, her mind racing. Bombs. Not just ordinary cargo, but weapons moving through Yorkshire to Germany during wartime. Was this what had sent her mother fleeing across the Atlantic? Was this the secret Uncle Gregory had been trying to unravel for decades? The implications were staggering. Sebastian Von Vogel, Sullivan's uncle, was potentially involved in supplying weapons to the enemy during the war. Yet, her mother's entry suggested confusion rather than certainty. Questions about whether the shipment might have legitimate purposes. The pink silk scarf caught her eye as she descended the stairs, its presence like a counter-argument to the dark discoveries in the journal. Sullivan had chosen it for her, a man connected to these shadowy events by blood, if not by deed. Tonight, she would sit across from him, making pleasant conversation while carrying knowledge of his family's possible treachery. The bathroom mirror reflected her troubled expression as she ran hot water for a bath. Steam curled around her face as she considered her options. Cancel dinner, citing a headache or sudden obligation. Go but maintain careful distance, revealing nothing. Or approach the evening as a reconnaissance mission, probing gently for information while presenting an innocent facade. None felt right. None felt like her. As she sank into the hot water, Sonya made her decision. She would go to dinner as herself, not as Helena's daughter, not as Gregory's niece, not as a vessel for decades-old secrets. Just Sonya Matthews, a young woman from New York, exploring her family roots, meeting an intriguing man for dinner. The bombs, the manifests, the midnight freight. Those questions could wait for another day. Tonight would be about the present, not the past. She dried herself and moved to the wardrobe, selecting a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. The neckline was modest but flattering, the skirt falling just below her knees, appropriate for a village restaurant, yet undeniably feminine. Her mother's silver pendant completed the outfit, a small piece of Helena accompanying her into uncertain territory. As twilight settled over Yorkshire, Sonya wound the pink silk scarf around her neck, its softness a reminder of Sullivan's unexpected thoughtfulness. The golden birds seemed to take flight with each movement, catching the last rays of sunlight. The walk to the Heather Bell would take 20 minutes, just enough time to clear her head before the encounter. As Sonya locked the cottage door behind her, the distant sound of a train whistle carried across the moors, a reminder that some journeys once begun carried one inexorably forward to unknown destinations. The birds on her scarf seemed to flutter in the evening breeze, golden wings carrying her toward a dinner date with the nephew of a man who might have smuggled bombs to Germany, or might have been part of something more complex than the simple treachery the evidence suggested. Either way, she was determined to form her own judgments, independent of her uncle's theories or her mother's fears. Tonight, Sonya Matthews would chart her own course through these complicated waters. The evening had transformed Yorkshire into a painting, indigo sky bleeding into gold at the horizon, silhouettes of ancient oaks standing sentinel along the lane. Sonya's heels clicked against the cobblestones, a steady rhythm punctuating the countryside symphony of rustling leaves and distant owls beginning their nightly calls. The air carried a complex bouquet, loamy earth from the afternoon rain, wild roses climbing stone walls, and wood smoke from cottage chimneys. As she passed the old railway crossing, another scent joined the medley, the metallic tang of steel tracks, a whisper of coal dust, ghosts of journeys past. Her mother had walked this same path once, perhaps contemplating her complicated relationships with Von Vogel men. Gas lamps flickered to life along the village's main street, their golden lights spilling onto wet cobblestones in shimmering pools. Shop owners were closing for the day, pulling down shutters with the scrape of metal against stone, nodding respectful greetings as she passed. A group of men exited the local pub, their laughter fading as they noticed her, a young woman alone, dressed for an evening out, the pink silk scarf an unmistakable declaration of feminine intent. The village seemed to hold its breath around her, as if recognizing the significance of her journey. Curtains twitched in cottage windows, curious eyes following her progress. A stranger in familiar territory, Helena Matthews' daughter, meeting Sebastian Von Vogel's nephew. The symmetry would not be lost on the older residents who remembered the war years. The wind changed direction, carrying the mournful whistle of a distant train, Sullivan's night train perhaps testing the abandoned lines. The sound threaded through the darkening landscape like a memory seeking recognition. Sonya shivered despite the mild evening, pulling the scarf tighter around her neck, its silk warming against her skin. A fox darted across the lane ahead, its russet coat gleaming momentarily in the fading light before disappearing into a hedgerow. Wild creatures navigating boundaries between wilderness and civilization, between safety and danger. not unlike her careful steps into this uncharted territory with Sullivan. As the lane curved toward the outskirts of the village, the Heather Bell came into view, its whitewashed walls glowing golden in the illumination of wrought iron lanterns. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, and the hum of conversation and clink of glasses drifted through leaded windows. Cars sat in the small gravel lot, mostly modest local vehicles, but one stood apart, a gleaming Jaguar, its polished surface reflecting the evening light. He was already here, waiting. Sonya paused at the edge of the pool of light cast by the entrance lanterns. Through the window she could see inside, exposed oak beams crossing the ceiling, copper pots hanging in the kitchen doorway, tables draped in crisp white linen. And there, at a corner table with a view of both the door and the moors beyond, sat Sullivan Von Vogel, checking his watch with studied casualness. For one suspended moment, she stood on the threshold between past and future, between her mother's warnings and her curiosity. The golden birds on her scarf seemed to take flight in the gentle breeze, urging her forward into the warmth and light of the restaurant, toward the man whose family history was inexplicably entwined with her own. Taking a deep breath that tasted of heather and possibility, Sonya Matthews stepped forward, leaving the shadows behind. Sullivan Von Vogel arrived at the Heather Bell 40 minutes early, a calculated decision that had nothing to do with eagerness and everything to do with preparation. He preferred to control his environments whenever possible, a habit inherited from his uncle, refined by years of business negotiations where position and perspective could determine outcomes before words were ever exchanged. He selected the corner table himself, politely overriding the maitra's suggestion of a more central location. From here, he could observe the entrance while having the ancient stone wall at his back, a defensible position, his subconscious noted, though he was expecting dinner conversation, not combat. The restaurant had changed little since his childhood. The same massive fireplace dominated the far wall, flames dancing over cedar logs that filled the room with sweet, resinous warmth. Oil paintings of the Yorkshire moors hung in heavy gilt frames, capturing the wild landscape in various seasons and moods. The ceiling beams still bore the carved initials of patrons from centuries past, merchants, aristocrats, and lovers commemorating special nights. Sullivan ordered scotch, neat, and watched the amber liquid catch firelight as the waiter placed it before him. He'd chosen this restaurant deliberately, knowing its significance to both families. Elizabeth had indeed loved the place, had celebrated her birthdays here, and had introduced Helena Matthews to its charm during those months when she'd taken the young secretary under her protective wing. This table had been Elizabeth's favorite. From here, one could watch the sunset transform the moors into a copper sea and could note every arrival without being immediately observed in return. His aunt had understood the value of observation, of gathering information before revealing one's position. Another inherited trait. The dinner reservation had been impulsive, uncharacteristically so for a man who typically planned conversations days in advance. But seeing Sonya in the bookshop, watching her fingers trace poetry volumes with such reverence, had awakened something unexpected. Curiosity, perhaps, or something more dangerous. Morrison's warnings echoed in his mind as he sipped his scotch. The Matthews women had indeed proven complicated for Von Vogel men in the past. Helena's investigations, discoveries, and flight had dealt devastating blows to his family's empire and reputation. Her daughter represented opportunity and threat, a chance to reclaim what was lost or lose what little remained. Yet, as he'd watched Sonya move through the village that morning, her expression so open, her delight in simple pleasures so genuine, he'd found it difficult to view her as an adversary. The calculation behind his invitation had gradually shifted from strategic to personal, an unwelcome development, but not necessarily a disadvantageous one. The restaurant began to fill with other diners, a retired colonel and his wife at their regular Tuesday table, a group of local businessmen celebrating some minor victory, and a young couple marking an anniversary with nervous glances and shy smiles. Sullivan acknowledged greetings with practiced politeness. His reputation in the village, a complex mixture of inherited respect and whispered suspicion. He checked his watch, the gold timepiece that had once belonged to his father. 20 minutes until 8. He'd already ordered wine, a French Bordeaux from a good year, neither ostentatiously expensive nor disappointingly common. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the moors in deepening shades of purple and indigo. Lights from distant farms appeared like earthbound stars, marking human presence in the ancient landscape. Somewhere out there lay the old railway lines, waiting to be revived, to carry new secrets through the darkness. Sullivan's thoughts turned to the meeting with Morrison, to metal boxes buried in gravel, to opportunities and obligations. His future was taking shape along those abandoned tracks, wealth, influence, redemption for the Von Vogel name, all proceeding according to plan, except for Sonya Matthews. She was the unplanned variable, the unexpected factor that could alter equations and outcomes. Dangerous, intriguing. Movement at the entrance caught his eye. A glimpse of golden hair, the distinctive pink silk of the scarf he'd selected. Sullivan straightened almost imperceptibly, adjusting his cuffs, his heartbeat quickening despite his attempts at detachment. She paused in the doorway, framed by the evening light, searching the room until her gaze met his. For a suspended moment, he saw her hesitation and watched her mentally cross some internal threshold before she stepped fully into the restaurant. Sullivan rose from his chair, a gesture of old-world courtesy that felt suddenly genuine rather than performative. As she approached, he found himself noticing details with heightened awareness. The simple elegance of her blue dress, the silver pendant at her throat, the way the scarf complemented the flush of color in her cheeks. "You came," he said simply, the careful opening remarks he'd prepared evaporating into the warm air between them. Two adversaries' children, meeting on neutral ground. Two strangers connected by history and blood. Two people discovering something unexpected in the aftermath of old conflicts. The game had changed, and Sullivan Von Vogel, master strategist, found himself improvising for the first time in years. "I did," she replied, allowing him to pull out her chair. "Though I suspect half the village is placing bets on whether I'm here as a Matthews or a spy." The corner of his mouth lifted. "And which are you?" "Tonight, just Sonya." She settled into her seat, taking in the restaurant's warmth. "This place is lovely, like stepping into another century. Those ceiling beams must be ancient. Tudor period." "The building was originally a coaching inn," Sullivan explained, watching the firelight play across her features. "The scarf suits you. I hoped it might." Sonya touched the silk at her throat, a soft flush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you. It was unexpected. Pleasant surprises are rare enough to be worth creating." He poured wine into her glass. "The proprietor here specializes in them. Wait until you try Elizabeth's pears." "Named after your aunt?" Sonya asked, accepting the glass. Sullivan nodded, something softening in his expression. "Her favorite dessert, poached in honey and rosewater. She used to bring me here on my birthdays." He paused, studying her. "You're lovelier than your photographs suggest." "Photographs?" Her eyebrow arched delicately. "Your graduation picture in the New York Herald. I may have done some light research after our bookshop encounter." His admission came with an unapologetic smile. "You were valedictorian. Impressive. And you're changing the subject." Sonya took a sip of wine, holding his gaze over the rim. "But yes, English literature from Columbia. My mother insisted on education above all else." The waiter arrived with menus, interrupting momentarily. After he departed, Sullivan leaned forward slightly. "What brings an English literature graduate to Yorkshire? Besides family history?" Sonya traced the menu's embossed cover. "Curiosity, unfinished stories." "My mother spoke of England rarely, but when she did..." She paused, weighing how much to reveal. There was something in her voice. Loss, perhaps, or longing. "For someone specific?" Sullivan asked carefully. "I don't know. She never remarried after my father. Never even dated, as far as I know. Sonya glanced around the restaurant, taking in the other diners. It's strange being here, seeing places she must have seen, meeting people who might have known her when she was my age. Yet you never visited while she was alive. She refused to consider it. England was firmly in her past, not to be revisited. Sonia's fingers played with her napkin. What about you? Have you always lived at Whispering Pines? Sullivan took a measured sip of wine. After my parents died, yes. Sebastian and Elizabeth raised me there. The estate has been in the family since railway money built it in the 1890s. I'm sorry about your parents, Sonya said, genuine compassion in her voice. Mr. Bridgewater mentioned your loss. Ah, Bridgewater and his village histories. Sullivan's tone remained light, though something in his eyes closed briefly. Mother had tuberculosis. Father couldn't bear life without her. Ancient history now. Not to you, I think, she observed quietly. The waiter returned for their orders. Sullivan recommended the lamb, raised on local farms. Sonya chose trout from Yorkshire streams. As they settled into conversation, the restaurant hummed around them with gentle activity. Tell me about New York, Sullivan said, refilling their glasses. I've visited for business, but never seen it through a native's eyes. Sonya described her city with affection, the bookshop near the harbor, the changing seasons in Central Park, the constant motion and energy. As she spoke, Sullivan watched her with growing fascination, offering occasional questions that revealed genuine interest rather than polite conversation. You miss it, he observed. Parts of it, she admitted. My friend Michael, the Fields family who took me in after Mother died. The predictability of my days. She met his gaze directly. But there's something about Yorkshire that feels significant, as if I've been moving toward it my whole life without knowing. The pull of ancestral soil, Sullivan murmured. I understand that completely. Their food arrived, elegantly presented on fine china. The first bites were accompanied by appreciative silence, broken when Sonya gestured toward the moors visible through the window. Those old railway lines fascinate me, she said casually. My uncle says they were quite significant during the war. Sullivan's hand paused imperceptibly before cutting another piece of lamb. They were essential infrastructure. Yorkshire coal powered much of Britain's industry. Mother's journal mentions working night shifts and monitoring freight runs. Seems an unusual position for a secretary. Sebastian had unconventional staffing practices, Sullivan replied, his tone carefully neutral. The war created unique demands on everyone, including midnight trains to Dresden. Sonya kept her voice light, watching for his reaction. The Dresden line was my uncle's particular project. Sullivan met her gaze steadily. Private freight with minimal oversight. Profitable until the bombing in '43, the same bombing that killed him. Sullivan nodded, a shadow crossing his features. A tragic coincidence. Or perhaps not coincidental at all, depending on which theories you prefer. Which do you prefer? Sonya asked, leaning forward slightly. He studied her for a moment. I believe my uncle made powerful enemies and dangerous allies. The specifics died with him, and with my mother. Sonya added softly. Something shifted in Sullivan's expression. A brief, unguarded moment of genuine curiosity. What did she tell you about that time? Almost nothing. I've been piecing it together through her journals and Uncle Gregory's research. Sullivan's wineglass paused halfway to his lips. Gregory Constant was an investigator on my uncle's death. Still pursuing theories after all these years? Once a detective, always a detective, Sonya replied. Though he's in London tonight, meeting an old colleague. Something about new information. The change in Sullivan was subtle, a slight sharpening of focus, like a camera lens adjusting. London? I hope it's a pleasant reunion. She took another bite of trout. This is delicious. Perfect. I'm pleased you're enjoying it. Sullivan relaxed slightly, redirecting. Speaking of recommendations, have you considered visiting Cambridge while you're here? Their rare books collection is exceptional. Are you trying to send me away, Mr. Von Vogel? Sonya smiled, lightening the moment. "Sullivan, please." And quite the opposite. He leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly. "I'm finding your company unexpectedly compelling." The honesty in his tone caught her off guard. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, historical complexities temporarily suspended. "Tell me about your work," she said, breaking the silence. "Mr. Bridgewater mentioned you're involved in transportation, like your uncle. Consulting, primarily. Logistics, infrastructure rehabilitation." Sullivan's answer came smoothly and practiced. Old railway lines still have value in today's market, with the right investment, including the Von Vogel private lines. His smile acknowledged her directness, especially those. Though the board remains hesitant to reopen them officially. Why? Outdated safety concerns, bureaucratic inertia. Sullivan hesitated, then added, "and perhaps lingering questions about their wartime usage." "My mother's journals mention weight discrepancies in the manifests," Sonya said, watching his reaction carefully. "Cargo heavier than reported." Sullivan's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in his eyes. Railway logistics during wartime became creative. Resources needed to move where they could be most effective, sometimes outside official channels. "That's a diplomatic way of describing smuggling," Sonya observed. "War creates moral gray areas," he replied, meeting her gaze directly. "Actions taken for survival or victory that might seem questionable in peacetime. Is that what your uncle was doing? Creating moral gray areas?" Sullivan took a deliberate sip of wine. Sebastian Von Vogel did what he thought necessary for his family and business to survive, as did James Morrison, the transport liaison who worked closely with him. "Morrison?" Sonya repeated, the name triggering recognition. "My mother mentions a James in her journals." Something shuttered in Sullivan's expression, a door closing. Morrison Transport is now one of Europe's largest logistics companies. Interesting how war connections transform into peacetime success. Sonya noted his sudden reticence, filing away the name for future investigation. Success built on secrets tends to require maintaining those secrets, she observed. Indeed. Sullivan signaled for the dessert menu, smoothly shifting topics. "Now, you must try Elizabeth's pears. Some traditions are worth preserving." As the meal progressed to dessert, their conversation turned to lighter subjects. Books they'd both read, places they hoped to visit, childhood memories safely distant from railway conspiracies. Sullivan proved knowledgeable about literature, matching Sonya's references with thoughtful insights. She found herself laughing at his dry observations, momentarily forgetting the complex history between their families. The restaurant gradually emptied, the hour growing late. Outside, a full moon illuminated the moors, silvering the landscape. "It's a perfect night," Sullivan remarked, glancing out the window. "Clear skies, good visibility. Ideal for exploring." "Exploring?" Sonya asked, finishing her dessert. "History." His smile held something secretive. "With your uncle in London, perhaps you'd be interested in seeing the old railway lines by moonlight. There's something haunting about them after dark." "Are you suggesting a nighttime expedition, Mr. Von Vogel?" "Sullivan," he corrected again. "And yes, I am. Some things are best discovered away from prying eyes." The invitation hung between them, charged with possibilities. Sonya considered him carefully, the sophisticated businessman, proposing an adventure with decidedly clandestine overtones. "What exactly would we be looking for on these moonlit tracks?" she asked, direct yet playful. "Perhaps answers to questions your mother left unasked," he replied, equally direct. "Or simply the experience of walking through history instead of merely reading about it." Sonya felt the weight of her mother's journal knowledge, of Uncle Gregory's warnings, balanced against her curiosity and the undeniable attraction she felt toward the man across from her. "I should warn you," she said finally. "I'm wearing entirely inappropriate shoes for railway exploration." Sullivan's smile was genuine, warming his usually guarded features. I keep walking boots in the car, always prepared for impromptu adventures. As he paid the bill, declining her offer to share the cost with old-world courtesy, Sonya realized she was about to venture into the night with a man her uncle would consider dangerous, to explore locations potentially linked to wartime secrets, drawn by a combination of historical curiosity and personal chemistry she couldn't quite explain. "Shall we?" Sullivan extended his hand as they rose from the table. Sonya took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, a connection that seemed to carry currents beyond their physical touch. "Lead the way," she replied, stepping into whatever the night might reveal. Sullivan's Jaguar purred along the narrow country roads, headlights carving a path through darkness. Inside, the leather seats released a rich aroma that mingled with Sonya's subtle perfume. Something with notes of jasmine, Sullivan thought. Elegant but not overpowering. "Your boots should be behind the passenger seat," he said, slowing as they approached an unmarked turnoff. Sonya reached back, finding the promised footwear. Sturdy brown leather walking boots, well worn but meticulously maintained like everything in Sullivan's possession. "Prepared for every contingency," she observed, slipping off her heels as he brought the car to a stop on a gravel verge. "How very Von Vogel of you." "Family trait," he acknowledged with a slight smile, "though I prefer to think of it as practical romanticism. Preparation allows for spontaneity." The moonlight transformed the landscape into a silver-washed tableau as they stepped from the car. Ancient oak trees stood sentinel along the old service road, their gnarled branches reaching toward a star-scattered sky. The boots fit Sonya surprisingly well with her stockinged feet, suggesting they might have belonged to a woman originally. "My mother's," Sullivan said, noting her questioning glance. She loved hiking the moors in all seasons. The admission, personal, unguarded, hung in the cool night air between them. They walked in companionable silence down the overgrown track, gravel crunching beneath their boots. Night creatures rustled in the underbrush, hedgehogs foraging, rabbits freezing at their approach, and occasional owls' wings beating soft against the darkness. The air tasted of wild thyme and damp earth, with metallic undertones of the rusted rails that gradually came into view. "The Von Vogel spur line," Sullivan explained, gesturing toward the tracks emerging from shadow. "Connected to the main Yorkshire-Hamburg route, but privately owned and operated. Built by my great-grandfather in 1885, expanded by Sebastian during the 30s, moonlight gleamed along the rails, transforming ordinary steel into ribbons of liquid silver, stretching into darkness. Nature had begun reclaiming the line. Wild roses climbed the remnants of signal posts, heather pushed through gravel beds, and persistent green shoots emerged between weathered wooden ties. "It's beautiful," Sonya said softly. "Melancholy but beautiful." Sullivan watched her as she knelt to examine a wild orchid growing beside the tracks, her face lifted to the moonlight, golden hair silvered by its glow. Something tightened in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation he couldn't immediately identify. "This way," he said, offering his hand to help her rise. "There's something I want to show you." Their fingers remained intertwined as he led her along the tracks, the contact seeming both casual and significant. The rails curved gently through a copse of silver birch trees, their white trunks ghostly in the darkness, before opening to a small clearing where a solitary signal box stood against the night sky. "Box 23, Sullivan said. "Harrogate Junction." The structure was a testament to Victorian engineering. Sturdy brick base, weathered wooden upper story, and slanted roof designed to shed Yorkshire's frequent rain. Windows, clouded with decades of grime, reflected moonlight in dull squares. A set of iron stairs zigzagged up its side, leading to a narrow platform. "It's like a sentry," Sonya observed. "Watching over empty tracks." "Not always empty," Sullivan replied, his voice dropping slightly. "My night trains still run occasionally, testing the lines." She turned to him, curiosity evident in her expression. "For what purpose?" "Possibilities," he said simply. Heritage is meaningless without future application. His hand released hers as he moved toward the signal box base, kneeling beside the rails. Sonya watched as he began clearing away stones and debris from a specific section of trackbed, his movements deliberate, focused. "What are you looking for?" she asked, moving closer. Sullivan glanced up, moonlight catching the angles of his face. For a moment, he seemed to weigh his response, calculation visible in his expression before something softened. "Truth," he said finally, "buried by those who came before us." His fingers worked methodically, removing decades of accumulated gravel until they struck something solid. "Here," he said, satisfaction evident in his tone. Sonya knelt beside him, their shoulders nearly touching as he excavated a metal box roughly the size of a cigar case from beneath the tracks. The container was weather-stained but intact, sealed against time and elements. "My uncle's insurance policy," Sullivan explained, brushing dirt from the box's surface. "Documentation he preserved should questions arise about ownership or operations." "Questions from whom?" Sonya asked, her voice hushed in the night's stillness. "Authorities, competitors, those who might challenge the Von Vogel claim to these lines." His fingers traced the box's edges, finding a hidden catch. Sebastian didn't trust conventional record-keeping. Too easily altered or destroyed, the moment felt weighted with significance. This man revealing family secrets in moonlight, the two of them alone with history unearthed between them. Sonya was acutely conscious of their isolation, of the intimate bubble created by darkness and shared discovery. Sullivan hesitated before opening the box, his gaze meeting hers. "Once revealed, some things cannot be unknown," he said quietly. "Are you certain you want to see?" The question seemed to extend beyond the metal container, encompassing all the complex history between their families and all the possible futures their current path might create. "Yes," Sonya said simply. "I need to know." The catch was released with a soft click. Inside, protected by watertight seals, lay several folded documents and what appeared to be a small leather-bound book. Sullivan extracted the papers carefully, spreading them on a smooth section of track bed where moonlight illuminated the faded text. "Property deeds," he explained, indicating official stamps and signatures, rights-of-way agreements, mineral rights beneath the tracks. All legally executed, despite what certain investigators might suggest about Von Vogel operations. Sonya leaned closer, studying the documents. "These are what you came for? Legal papers?" Her voice entertained a moment of sarcasm. "Legitimacy matters," Sullivan replied, "especially when rebuilding what others tried to dismantle." As they bent over the yellowed papers, a cloud momentarily obscured the moon, bathing them in deeper shadow. In that brief darkness, Sonya became acutely aware of Sullivan's proximity, the warmth radiating from his body against the night's chill, the subtle cedar and sandalwood notes of his cologne, the sound of his measured breathing. When moonlight returned, she found him watching her, his expression unreadable yet intense. "You're not what I expected, Sonya Matthews," he said softly. "What did you expect? Someone more like your mother, perhaps, suspicious, guarded." His gaze held hers. "Less willing to walk abandoned railways at midnight with a Von Vogel." "You're not what I expected either," she admitted. Uncle Gregory's descriptions painted someone more villainous. Sullivan supplied, amusement touching his voice. "Calculating," she corrected. "Though I suspect you're that too, just not exclusively." Their eyes held in the silver darkness, something unspoken passing between them. Sullivan's hand moved as if to touch her face, then hesitated, returning instead to the documents. "There's more to find," he said, refolding the papers and returning them to the box. "Other locations, other records. Would you like to continue our exploration?" Sonya glanced down the moonlit tracks, stretching like a silver promise into the night. Part of her recognized the potential danger in this alliance. Not a physical threat, but the risk of emotional entanglement with a man whose interests likely opposed her family's. Yet another part thrilled with the adventure, the connection forming between them, to the possibility of discovering truths her mother had never shared. Yes, she decided, rising to her feet. Show me more. They walked further along the tracks, conversation flowing more easily now. Sullivan spoke of his childhood exploring these lines, of his plans to restore certain sections, of the engineering challenges involved. Sonya found herself sharing stories of New York, of her literary ambitions, of her complicated relationship with her mother's silence about the past. In a small valley where the tracks crossed a burbling stream, they paused to rest on a fallen log. The night had deepened around them, the moon climbing higher to cast different shadows across the landscape. Crickets chirped in rhythmic pulses, accompanied by the gentle percussion of water over stones. "May I ask you something personal?" Sonya ventured, breaking a comfortable silence. Sullivan turned toward her, moonlight silvering his profile. "You may ask." "I might not answer." "Fair enough." She studied him for a moment. "Why is this so important to you? These tracks, these buried documents, it's more than business, isn't it?" The question hung between them, unexpectedly intimate. Sullivan's gaze turned toward the distant horizon, where the silhouette of whispering pines was just visible against the night sky. "Legacy," he said finally, "not just material inheritance, but vindication, perhaps." Sebastian was branded a traitor by some after his death. The family name tarnished by accusations never proven. His voice took on a different quality, less controlled, more vulnerable. When you lose your parents young, you cling to whatever family identity remains. The Von Vogel railways aren't just steel and timber, they're my bloodline made manifest. The admission seemed to surprise even him, as if he'd revealed more than intended. Sonya's hand moved to cover his where it rested on the log between them, the contact gentle but deliberate. "I understand that," she said softly. "After Mother died, I found myself desperately searching her possessions for clues, connections, anything to maintain a link to who she was, who I might be because of her." Their fingers intertwined almost unconsciously, both seeking comfort in the shared experience of loss despite the complicated history that separated their families. "What happens when you've restored it all?" Sonya asked. "The tracks, the family name. What then?" Sullivan's thumb traced small circles against her palm, the gesture thoughtful rather than simply affectionate. "I haven't looked beyond the restoration," he admitted. Perhaps that's the limitation of living in service to the past. The moment stretched between them, intimate and uncertain. Sullivan's gaze dropped to their joined hands, then lifted to her face, moonlight revealing a conflict in his expression, desire tempered by reservation, attraction fighting caution. Sonya felt her own internal struggle, drawn to this complex man while aware of all the reasons such attraction might be unwise. Her mother's journal entries, Uncle Gregory's warnings, and the mysterious cargo shipments all suggested Sullivan Von Vogel represented dangerous territory. Yet here in the moonlight, with his hand warm against hers and vulnerability visible beneath his composed exterior, those dangers seemed abstract compared to the immediate connection between them. When he finally spoke, his voice had regained its customary control. "We should continue. There's another location not far from here." As they rose to follow the tracks deeper into the night, both were conscious of a threshold not yet crossed but increasingly difficult to avoid. Their shoulders brushed occasionally as they walked, conversation flowing naturally despite the undercurrents of tension. Above them, stars wheeled in ancient patterns, indifferent to human complications below. Around them, the Yorkshire landscape kept its secrets, as it had for generations before them and would for generations to come. The tracks gleamed beneath their feet, leading forward into shadow and possibility. They discovered 2 more metal boxes along the tracks, each containing different fragments of the Von Vogel railway history. Surveyors' maps with handwritten notations, legal correspondence regarding right-of-way disputes, even a faded photograph of Sebastian standing proudly beside the night flyer's gleaming engine. As Sullivan carefully returned the last box to its hiding place, Sonya noticed a change in his demeanor, a gradual withdrawal, as if he were rebuilding walls that had momentarily lowered between them. His explanations became more measured, his gestures more contained. The professional facade was returning, like mist reclaiming the moors around them. "It's getting late," he observed, checking his watch. "Nearly midnight. I should return you to your uncle's cottage." The sudden shift confused her. They'd been connecting so naturally just moments before, hands occasionally brushing as they examined documents, shoulders touching as they bent over the hidden treasures. Something in the final metal box, perhaps, had triggered this retreat. "Of course," she replied, matching his more formal tone. "I hadn't realized the hour." They walked back toward the car in near silence, separated now by a careful foot of distance that hadn't existed earlier. Moonlight caught the tension in Sullivan's jaw, the deliberate way he kept his gaze on the path ahead, rather than turning toward her as he had throughout the evening. The night air had grown colder, and Sonya wrapped her arms around herself, the silk scarf doing little against the chill. Without comment, Sullivan removed his jacket and placed it gently around her shoulders, a gentlemanly gesture performed with careful restraint, avoiding unnecessary contact. "Thank you," she said, his warmth and scent enveloping her. "For the jacket, and for sharing your family's history." He nodded, opening the car door for her. Some history is better shared selectively. The drive back followed winding country lanes, moonlight fleeting between overhanging branches. In the confined space of the Jaguar, Sonya was acutely aware of Sullivan's proximity, the controlled movement of his hands on the steering wheel, the profile etched in the dashboard light, the measured cadence of his breathing. The evening's intimacy lingered in the air between them, neither acknowledged nor dismissed. "You remind me of someone," she said finally, breaking the silence. "A friend from New York." Sullivan glanced at her, curiosity momentarily overtaking his reserve. "In what way?" He has the same hesitation, as if always calculating the risk of moving closer. Sonya watched his reaction carefully, always stopping just short of saying what he truly means. Something flickered across Sullivan's expression. Recognition, perhaps. And this friend, Michael, was it? Does he have good reason for his caution? I used to think it was simply shyness. Now I wonder if it's something deeper. She turned slightly in her seat to face him, fear that revealing too much might change how others see him. The car slowed as they approached a crossroads, the engine's purr dropping to a low rumble. Sullivan's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the wheel. "Some revelations can't be undone," he said quietly, "particularly between people with complicated histories, like a Matthews and a Von Vogel." His slight smile held no humor. Precisely. The remainder of the journey passed in thoughtful silence. When they reached Uncle Gregory's cottage, lights still burned in the downstairs windows despite the late hour. Sullivan noted this with a slight narrowing of his eyes. "Your uncle has returned early," he observed, pulling to a stop. "So, it seems..." Sonya felt a twinge of disappointment. Their evening bubble was about to burst against the reality of family allegiances and historical grievances. Sullivan cut the engine, but made no move to exit the car. "Before you go," he said, turning toward her, a word of caution. Something in his tone made her pause, hand on the door handle. "The paths we walked tonight, both literal and figurative,